Hello and welcome to my talk about artificial intelligence in medicine. My name is Martin Weihrauch. These are the topics of the talk. First, I will start with the human intelligence. Now, what is intelligence? Well, intelligence has been defined in many ways according to Wikipedia. The capacity for logic, understanding, self-awareness, learning, emotional knowledge, reasoning, planning, creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving. And more generally, it can be described as the ability to perceive or infer information and to retain it as knowledge to be applied towards adaptive behaviors with an environment or context. When we talk about intelligence, and especially artificial intelligence, one name often sticks out, and that is the one of Alan Turing, who lived from 1912 to 1954. And it's interesting to note that Turing's aversion to work just as hard for the humanities as for science resulted in him failing his exams. Since this worsened his GPA, he had to transfer to a less prominent college, King's College in Cambridge, in 1931 against his wishes to continue his studies at Trinity College. And this also shows a little bit with how we humans deal with especially very intelligent human beings, and Alan Turing has a couple of other traits that really are extraordinary, as you will see. So when it comes to Alan Turing's intelligence and the rest of humankind, it reminds me of the quote of Albert Einstein: "Two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity." And I'm not sure about the universe. Well, we're not sure if he ever said that, but it sure sounds like him. So in 1936, Turing invented the theoretical Turing Machine. It's a computer model of the theoretical computer science and a model of how a computer works, and it can be still viewed as correct today. In 1940, actually he worked for a secret mission of the British government in the Second World War and invented the Turing Bomb. And the Turing Bomb was an electromechanical decryption machine against the German encryption device Enigma. And it is believed that Turing may have shortened the course of the Second World War by 2 years because the British people had intelligence over the Germans that they ultimately used in a lot of strikes against the Germans. And as a German, I can be only grateful to Turing because I believe that without Turing, Germany may have received the same fate as Japan in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In 1950, he described the Turing test, which is important for artificial intelligence research. So if a dialogue with a machine seems indistinguishable from behavior, we should speak of machine intelligence, or what we would coin today as artificial intelligence. Through his publication, Turing had a decisive influence on the development of artificial intelligence. Now, what do you do with a genius like him? Well, in 1952, he was caught with gross indecency and perversion and was diagnosed with a psychiatric disease, and this has to be put into quotes today, namely homosexuality. And he was given the choice of being imprisoned for a year or being chemically castrated, so taking female hormones to lower his sex drive. And he actually decided for the chemical castration, and he was getting severely depressed, and nowadays it's pretty clear that this may have been due to the hormone treatment that he received, and ultimately he committed suicide. Only in 2013, so a lot of years later, he was being pardoned by the Queen and rehabilitated. So this is a striking example of how humankind treats highly intelligent individuals, especially those who are not marching their own troops, so to speak. And if you ask yourself, so what was so special about Turing? Well, nowadays it's relatively clear that he probably had Asperger's syndrome. And it leads me to saying that we should be interested in human intelligence and intelligent people in order to more effectively develop artificial intelligence. And if you look at this so-called autism spectrum of people with Asperger's or people with attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, ADHD or ADD, you will see that probably 0.1% of all people have Asperger's, and approximately 5% have ADD or ADHD. And it's unknown how many people might have a small or mild autism. But among the images that you see below, all these people either had ADHD or Asperger's. And of course, they weren't really necessarily all diagnosed, but by nowadays standards, it's pretty clear that these were their traits. And by now we know that ADHD, for instance, and in some ways also Asperger's, can be the entrepreneur's superpower. So people with ADHD especially are novelty seeking, have a high impulsivity, have a very high activity level, and can hyper focus. And especially Richard Branson, it's pretty clear that he has ADHD, probably also Elon Musk and the IKEA founder. And Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates may have some kind of a mild autism that brings, alongside with their very high IQ, also some kind of a genius out of them. Now, it's good to actually know about these things, about the so-called neurodiversity, and companies that need intelligent people should pay attention to this neurodiversity when hiring new employees. And you can actually discriminate between neurotypical staff, ADHD and Asperger's, and you can think about that neurotypical staff and with or who could be people who are more 9-to-5ers. They can be very good and are more organized, can be very good head of software development, can be software developers in a team, or can be working in accounting, quality management, which also takes a lot of organization skills, or in the back office. Whereas people with ADHD in a software company can be, for instance, head of product development, or can do team management, or independent software developers. People in sales are often people who where ADHD can actually help. And lastly, with Asperger's, a lot of them could be extremely skilled code reviewers, software testers, and so forth. Now let's go to the development of artificial intelligence and the history of it. So here are a couple of cornerstones of the history of artificial intelligence. And in 1950, as we already said, Alan Turing developed the Turing test. In 1955, the American computer scientist John McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence. In 1961, General Motors had the first robot in an assembly line. In 1965, a first chatbot. And in 1997, some people may remember that, IBM's Deep Blue chess computer beat the chess world champion Garry Kasparov. Then in 1999, there was a first emotional AI demonstration, Kismet, that was at MIT. 2009, Google started to build self-driving cars. In 2011, that was another victory of artificial intelligence with the so-called IBM Watson. It defeated the Jeopardy champion. Then 2016, Google's DeepMind's AlphaGo defeated the world champion Lee Sedol at this Chinese board game Go. And then came the first medical breakthroughs, about which we will talk today. Now, the winner of a Turing test, and there is a kind of a championship every year, is the Mitsuku chatbot. And I won't read what I chatted with this chatbot, but you will see my texts are in blue and the answers of the chatbot are in black. And you will see it didn't take me a lot of questions or a lot of sentences that I wrote until I found out that Mitsuku is just a bot and not human. So it's far from being really good at succeeding at the Turing test. For some theory, so how or which term means what? Well, the broader term that covers everything is the term artificial intelligence. And then the term machine learning was started in the 80s. And it actually means that machines, like computers, can decide between certain truths. But it can also be with the help of algorithms. And then in the 2010s, the deep learning actually came to fruition, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now let's go to some theory. So the early artificial intelligence was based on programming, rules, and evaluation. So, for instance, a chess computer was a computer program, an algorithm that a human thought about, and where people coded actually what happens when. So in chess computers, usually the each figure has a certain rating and has a certain worth, and then the possible moves are just calculated by the computer. So it can calculate to a certain depth level, let's say for the next 10 or 5 moves, and then it just selects the one that is going to play out most well for the machine. So as we talk about medicine here, let's take an example. Let's say we would like to program a kind of artificial intelligence, some kind of an anemia calculator. So let's say we want to find out what kind of anemia, there are different types of anemia, does a human have depending on his or her blood results. And with a computer program, you can code something like if, for instance, gender equals male, and the hemoglobin level is below 13.5, or if the gender is female and the hemoglobin level is below 12.5, then we have anemia. And then we could, for instance, say if the MCV is below 94 and the MCH is below 35 and the ferritin is so-and-so, then we have a iron deficiency. And if the MCV is above 125 and so forth, it could be a vitamin B12 or a folic acid deficiency and so forth. Well, this approach has a lot of downsides, especially there can be hundreds of variations, if not thousands, which make a program like that almost unreadable after a while and extremely complex. So in 1987, in the New England Journal of Medicine, there was an article that actually read, "The field of medicine is so broad and complex that it is difficult, if not impossible, to capture the relevant information and rules." And that is actually true for programming artificial intelligence yourself. So in a new artificial intelligence, it is based on learning from examples. That's also called machine learning, or then also deep learning, with inputs and outputs. So for our example with the Enigma calculator, we would have a supervised machine learning, means we have input parameters like age, sex, height, weight, and so forth, and output options. So we are laying the ground truth. So we have to tell the machine, okay, with this, or in this patient, it was an iron deficiency, and this patient had a vitamin deficiency or an aplastic anemia, and so forth. And the machine can learn by these examples. And the deep learning is a special form of the machine learning. What is actually being done is neurons that we have in the brain or in the body are mimicked by algorithms. So a neuron, as depicted above, has dendrites and a cell body and an axon, and then there are inputs like signals coming in, and these are all processed and biologically, and there is an output, or there are outputs. And you can also see there this can be mimicked with algorithms. So there are inputs that are weighted, and there can be some kind of mathematical transfer function and some thresholds and some parameters, and then in the end we get an output. So this would be one neuron in a neural network. And in the deep learning, we have a lot of layers. That means a lot of mathematical functions with kind of parameters that change with every data that passes through them. So we have tasks. There's an input layer with raw data like an image, and we have a solution that is the output layer with a computational model from the data structure of several processing layers. So for instance, in this image, we have a result, in the end, an image with a couple of overlays, for instance, that tell us which cell in this histology image is, which cell. So let's talk about artificial intelligence in medicine. Is artificial intelligence suitable for medicine at all? Well, we have read the definition of intelligence in Wikipedia, and I would discriminate between a simple intelligence or some kind of a narrow artificial intelligence and the complex intelligence or a general artificial intelligence. Now, I would say that a simple intelligence is, for instance, a pattern recognition, learning, planning, maybe critical thinking, and some kind of a logic. So if the sky is blue, then the sun must be shining. So that's a pretty simple connection. Or if you see something on four wheels moving alongside in front of you and it makes some kind of noise, it's, probably a car. So you have a kind of a pattern recognition in your brain. That's some kind of a narrow AI, something where your brain can react to very quickly. And the simpler intelligence is something that we actually have in routine medical work, in patient care. So whenever I treated patients, sometimes I would also say I treat my patients with my brainstem. It's just a reaction. If the patient says, let's say I have some kind of nausea caused by chemotherapy, I would prescribe him immediately something that would work that he hasn't had so far. So it's cue reaction. Whereas complex intelligence, or what I would term, general AI, singularity, that is more creativity, problem solving, and the self-awareness. So in medicine, that is rather the field of research, development, and inventions. And you will see that AI is very suitable for medicine currently already with the simple intelligence or narrow AI, but is far from being usable for this complex intelligence. So the medical art and the artificial intelligence, well, the medical art is based mainly on experience, learning, training, and pattern recognition. So that's why often 35-year-old doctors are, well, on average better than the 27-year-old doctors, because they just have seen more patients and have a better pattern recognition. Whereas in software development, mathematics, or physics, it is based more on creativity and more complex connections, and it is rather dominated by young geniuses. And you will see that at the by the ages that companies were founded. For instance, Bill Gates was 23, Steve Jobs 21, Mark Zuckerberg 19, Sergey Brin 25, and Larry Page also 25. So that shows that this complex intelligence or general AI is something that is not so much reliant on pattern recognition, but rather it's based on something more complex that we don't completely understand. However, AI seems to be already well suited for medicine. So what are the AI applications for medicine? Well, it can be a lot. Actually, diagnostics is the first that comes to mind. Prognostic estimation, therapy improvement. So rather than having just some gut feeling, it's better to have validated data. Improving the workflows for physicians and also improving this personalized medicine. And to have the same high medical quality everywhere. So we can better spread out the knowledge. And ultimately, doctors would have more time for their patients. There's a very nice book that I want to recommend by Eric Topol, Deep Medicine. So let's have a look at the first study of artificial intelligence in medicine. Here I selected a study about skin cancer. It was published in the Nature magazine. And what actually was done, there was a group that trained a deep convolutional neural network, or CNN, with 130,000 photos of skin lesions that were histologically proven, so they had been looked at under the microscope. And this algorithm that was trained was tested against 21 dermatologists. And there were two classifications. One was basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma versus benign keratosis, and melanoma versus nevi or moles. So white lesions and black lesions, malignant versus benign. And mostly it were just regular photos, and only 3,374 of these 130,000 photos were dermatoscopy photos. So these are a little bit more magnified and more specialized. You can see the results here in these graphs, where on the y-axis you have the specificity and on the x-axis you have the sensitivity. You can see that the algorithm, which is the blue line, was never really inferior to the 21 dermatologists when it came to discriminating between carcinomas versus benign lesions and melanoma versus benign lesions. So actually mostly the algorithm was better. So let's move to the next study. It was published in JAMA, Deep Learning to Assess Long-Term Mortality from Chest Radiographs. So the question was, is it possible to use artificial intelligence to get a 12-year mortality prognosis for patients using only one thorax X-ray? What this study group did was they had training sets, actually almost 42,000 thorax X-rays from the 90s. There were some kind of cancer screening studies of smokers and non-smokers that had been performed. And they just took all these thorax or chest x-rays and trained a neural network with that. And they had the follow-up data of these patients over some course of years and could exactly say who died during these years and who did not. So after training these sets, they saw that the algorithms were able to put the patients into different risk groups according to their one chest x-ray, into very low to very high risk groups. And as you can see here in the survival data, that patients who had a very high risk were likely to die within, around 10 years. They had a very high mortality, whereas people with a very low score actually lived considerably longer. And that was true for both training sets that they had taken. So the interesting thing here is that when you compare that to the dermatology study, here AI has something that the doctors cannot do. So we doctors cannot look at a chest x-ray and say, oh, this patient has a very high mortality rate. We can say that if we see, okay, that is a lung cancer, so probably this patient is not gonna live long with that. Or if it's a normal chest x-ray, well, this patient doesn't have anything that I can see, so he probably lives long, but this is it. We would not be able to put patients into these categories. So this is something really new. Let's look at another study that was extremely surprising, and not for the fact which was obvious at first. So here, again, a JAMA paper. It was development and validation of a deep learning algorithm for detection of diabetic retinopathy in retinal fundus photographs. So here, again, approximately 130,000 photos were taken of the eye backgrounds, and they were being used to train a neural network, and then reviewed several times by 54 ophthalmologists. And again, we have these graphs that you can see here on the right side, where the algorithms usually don't perform inferior to the doctors, sometimes superior, at predicting diabetic retinopathy. But the more surprising fact of this Google study was actually that as other factors like the gender, the age, and everything else had also been put in the training sets, that this algorithm was capable of predicting, or actually saying, if this photo of the eye background of the retina comes from a male or a female by 97% certainty. And this is something that no ophthalmologist had ever discovered before. So there's something in this photo below that tells you that actually this photo comes from a woman. Now, we don't know why, and these neural networks are something like a black box, so we cannot really look inside and say, it's the blind spot, or it's the vessels, or the color that actually tells us now if it's a man or a woman. Only the algorithm knows currently, but there are research being done to figure that out better. So in our own company, Smart Media, our vision is already reality. Our mission is to revolutionize microscopic diagnostics in pathology and improve patient care through the use of our digital cloud solutions. And the implementation of artificial intelligence as a means to an end is our practice to support the pathologist in routine diagnostics. So we already have a Ki-67 estrogen and progesterone quantifier that is based on a neural network, and we're currently developing a PD-L1 quantifier. So I want to finalize my talk with some future scenarios And as always with scenarios, and that maybe in the future, this is just guesswork. So we all know the movies of Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and actually they kind of ring true a little bit. Like, is it possible that machines take over? Well, it certainly is true that machines may take over a couple of our jobs that we currently have. And as this is very difficult to predict for medicine, I took an easier example here that is related to cars. So this is my scenario that I created, but it may be completely nonsense. So this could be a scenario of self-driving electrical cars in Germany. In 2021, there is the first road registration of a self-driving car, maybe a Tesla, I don't know. And Tesla, all of a sudden, doesn't no longer sell cars. Instead, it puts all cars into the Tesla-operated fleet. Actually, Elon Musk has already twittered something to that effect, that he does not want to rent out any more Teslas or make lease contracts, but rather create his own fleet. From now on, you can order cars with an app and let yourself be driven to a destination. In 2020, there are first carpooling and subscription models possible. So, for instance, with your app, you can subscribe to be driven to work every morning and back in the afternoon. In 2024, hydrogen technology enables more energy and thus electric trucks and buses. For the first time, car manufacturers are recording a drop in sales due to declining demand. Fewer and fewer people want to own a car. Car sharing leads to fewer cars on the road. So, intelligent pooling. 2025 to 2028, in Germany, a total of 1 million people from the transport sector lose their jobs. Taxi, truck, and bus drivers. In 2025, automotive suppliers record a massive loss in sales due to declining combustion engines. Well, combustion engines have weird things like oil pumps, oil filters, spark plugs, radiators, pistons, etc. And actually, electric cars don't have all these parts, so they have to lay off employees. Insurance companies with first quarterly loss from car insurance business. Well, insurance companies, their number one business is a lot of times car insurance. So since we have now these fleet operators that can insure themselves, like Tesla, BMW, Volkswagen, who not, they can carry their own insurance. They don't need other insurance company to do that. So there are no more, less and less private cars. Also, there are 90% less accidents occurring, so you don't need so much insurance. In 2028, the cities breathe easier. There's better air and free sidewalks, less traffic on motorways, due to, for instance, bus pooling and night truck traffic. And in 2030, Germany is considering a driving ban for humans on German roads. From now on, only available on special routes, for instance the Nürburgring, due to significantly higher danger for people by people driving cars. Well, that's just a scenario, and there will be some truth to it on some points, and on others I probably missed it. Well, when it comes to medicine, it's really complex to guess the future. So I just put together a couple of simple things. So the areas of application will be first that AI increases significantly the image-dependent disciplines, for instance, radiology and pathology, as well as dermatology. In pathology, AI can screen all scanned specimens and prioritize the relevant cases. For instance, the pathologist will be greeted in the morning by the computer telling him, okay, these are all the tumor cases and these are all the, let's say, simpler nonsense cases. AI marks tumor centers in lymph nodes, for instance, in colon carcinoma, or it can detect Helicobacter in the stomach. AI increases in the research of pathology, so replacement of some immunohistochemistry stainings by simple HE staining because, well, artificial intelligence may be able to quantify Ki67 or PDL1 or something like that just by structure, clustering of cells, or other things. AI supports lab value interpretation. AI is very helpful for a lot of prognosis scores. And the consequences are that patients can quickly make their own diagnoses or estimate risks with apps. There's more automation, probably fewer medical assistants like blood collection robots, online scheduling. We don't need so many, medical staff. There may be some kind of help by AI in emergencies to route the patients to the correct department. Well, and these are the things that I currently see for medicine, but of course the field is way bigger. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope to have you visit our website at www.smartmedia.com.